This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Appreciate you all being here today at our HHAU Bereavement Committee meeting, where we also have some social work CEU accreditations available. We are honored and thrilled to have with us again today Jared Anderson. Jared is a humanist and unity endorsed interfaith chaplain. He is passionate about systems theory and social science approaches to well being, especially at the extremes of human experience. He has served as a chaplain in hospice, prison, hospital, first responder, and university settings, as well as the Utah Army National Guard. Jared, we are absolutely, again, thrilled to have you here today. We are, last time you were here, it was just absolutely remarkable. And just also as a reminder, Debbie had just said, as you're coming in, please put in your information for those CE credits. Um, and I don't know if I see Margine here. She is out on her way on a ferry at the moment. So if you're looking to say hello, she also is a part of our bereavement group. Um, thank you guys so much for being here. Jared, again, go ahead and take it away. We appreciate you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Very glad to be here. I hope that we can balance and integrate the convenience of a virtual meeting and the presence of the fact that you are where you are. So it's a challenge to do both of those things, but trust me, like I can definitely do it. I did not intend to have an object lesson. But I drafted my presentation at like 3 in the morning because I was called into the ICU. So that was very, very fitting and very appropriate. I'll be doing modeling and integration, again, taking seriously the limits and opportunities of this virtual meeting. So everyone, tell me if you can see, is my screen showing up okay? Great. So when I was asked to do this training, I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about my favorite topic, which is how to live life. A small, easy topic. But one thing that I love about working in our field, whether it's end of life or social work or chaplaincy, is that we get to practice and train ourselves in healthy processing of really, really big human issues. Things that are a once in a lifetime event or a handful of things, how many deaths do most of us experience? And yet when we work in end of life care, something that is, one of the most difficult and challenging experiences of someone's entire life is our Tuesday. And so there's a balance there where it's a really, really big deal. And also we need to be able to function in our day-to-day life. And so what I wanted to do for our time together is model and discuss this idea of not doing grief, but living it, integrating it, and kind of a different approach to grief. And so I'm calling it provocatively grieving life. So when we think about grief, most of us, and I know I'm, preaching to the choir, but most of us, even as professionals, we think about the really big things. We think about death that we have to handle and process. We think about divorce. We think about extreme loss, maybe, the loss of a job or dealing with world events that can be so heavy and kind of should be heavy if we're paying attention to it. I wanted to highlight during this time that grief is not only these big events that we are dealing with when they happen, but grief is a process, an experience that we deal with all the time, moment to moment, and hour to hour, day to day. It's a constant thing. And one of my favorite reminders that I've heard in grief training is that people are often reluctant to bring up loss to someone who's grieving. Oh, I don't want to make you think about your loved one who died. But the psychological truth is that for most of us, the hard things that we've been through are always on our mind, at least at some level. And so when other people give us that opportunity to talk about it, it's not that they are making us think about something that we wouldn't otherwise be thinking about. It's they give us the opportunity to share and process. And of course, we need to do that at their level. And so I'm calling this life and grief, and I want to talk about 5 different steps, which are naming, feeling, metabolizing, meaning, and integrating. And so in my own discernment process, I have learned that even more than a chaplain, I'm actually a wellness engineer. And I really love this idea of training and process and engineering these processes that kind of work no matter what. So what I'm going to promise you, in addition, to the CEU that you get, is that we're going to talk about practices that won't require much more of you, but they will help you integrate and metabolize the actual experience of being human, being alive in your day-to-day flow. So that's the structure of this presentation. So first, we need to name what is going on with us. And it was actually, I'm going to be sharing about myself again as a way of modeling and kind of grounding what we're talking about. It's funny because about 2 years ago, when in therapy, my therapist identified that I'm on the autism spectrum. My family was like, obviously, Jared, like that is not a surprise to anyone who knows you. And one thing that has been challenging in my own process of serving as a chaplain is that my brain chemistry does not understand avoidance. So for me, it's like, oh, why wouldn't you just matter-of-factly talk about all of the hardest things ever in life because they're real? And, why wouldn't you just say all the things? And so I have had to work very, very hard to understand and integrate the fact that all of us at some level, we all have an ambivalence around the experience of living and feeling and just, our conscious experience. And so this is something that we need to engage with. And why I shared this picture of Gandalf and the Balrog is because most mythologies in the world have this idea that what you name, you have power over, and what you will not name has power over you. So there are the stories of the demons or the ghosts or the monster. And if you can name this creature that is challenging you, its true name, you then have power over it. Whereas if until you know its name, it has power over you. And this is true of us as human beings. And isn't it powerful that just naming the difficult thing, or even if it's saying, this feels impossible to me, or I don't want to do this, or I'm overwhelmed, or I hate my job, or I don't want to do anything today, just speaking it changes it. And paradoxically, but also really predictably, once we name something, we increase our ability to engage with that thing. And so the first tool that I want to share is that as we are naming our reality, be as precise and specific as possible. And so one thing that has really helped me is when I'm talking about what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, what I'm going through, I make it honest, clear, and specific. So I'll say, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, or in this moment, I don't really feel like, going to work or whatever. So as a way of modeling this, we're going to have a bit of story time. And this is a book that I highly recommend, Consolations by David White. It is an amazing meditation on all sorts of aspects of being human. And this will take just a few minutes, and it's his meditation on heartbreak. And David White is one of my go-to sources of inspiration, really great for, those morning or IDT thoughts. And one thing that David White is very good at is that he names the difficult thing and then he keeps going and he shows how that difficult, painful thing has beauty and redemption to it. So these are his meditations on heartbreak. Heartbreak is unpreventable. So that's that first bracing naming of something. Heartbreak is unpreventable, the natural outcome of caring for people and things over which we have no control, of holding in our affections those who inevitably move beyond our line of sight. Heartbreak begins the moments we are asked to let go but cannot. In other words, it colors and inhabits and magnifies each and every day. Heartbreak is not a visitation, but a path that human beings follow through even the most average life. Heartbreak is an indication of our sincerity in a love relationship, in a life's work, in trying to learn a musical instrument in the attempt to shape a better, more generous self. Heartbreak is the beautifully helpless side of love and affection and is just as much an essence and emblem of care as the spiritual athlete's quick but abstract ability to let go. Heartbreak has its own way of inhabiting time and its own beautiful and trying patience in coming and going. Heartbreak is how we mature. Yet we use the word heartbreak as if it only occurs when things have gone wrong. An unrequited love, a shattered dream, a child lost before their time. Heartbreak, we hope, is something we hope we can avoid, something to guard against, a chasm to be carefully looked for and then walked around. The hope is to find a way to place our feet where the elemental forces of life will keep us in the manner to which we want to be accustomed, and which will keep us from the losses that all other human beings have experienced without exception since the beginning of conscious time. But heartbreak may be the very essence of being human, of being on the journey from here to there, and of coming to care deeply for what we find along the way. Our hope to circumvent heartbreak in adulthood is beautifully and ironically childlike. Heartbreak is as inescapable and inevitable as breathing, a part and a parcel of every path, asking for its due in every sincere course an individual takes. It may be that there may be not only no real life without the raw revelation of heartbreak, but no single path we can take within a life that will allow us to escape without having that imaginative organ we call the heart broken by what it holds and then has to let go. In a sobering physical sense, every heart does eventually break. as the precipitating reason for death, or because the rest of the body has given up before it can no longer sustain its steady beat. But hearts also break in an imaginative and psychological sense. There is almost no path a human being can follow that does not lead to heartbreak. A marriage, a committed vow to another, even in the most settled, loving relationship, will always break our hearts at one time or another. A successful marriage has often had its heart broken many times, just in order for the couple to stay together. Parenthood, no matter how the sincerity of our love for a child, will always break the mold of our motherly or fatherly hopes. A good work seriously taken will often take everything we have and still leave us wanting. And finally, even the most self-compassionate self-examination should, if we are sincere, lead eventually to existential disappointment. Realizing its inescapable nature, we can see heartbreak not as the end of the road or the cessation of hope, but as the close embrace of the essence of what we have wanted or are about to lose. It is the hidden DNA of our relationship with life, outlining outer forms even when we do not feel it by the intimate physical experience generated by its absence. It can also ground us truly in whatever grief we are experiencing, set us to planting a seed with what we have left, or appreciate what we have built even as we stand in its ruins. If heartbreak is inescapable and inevitable, it might be asking us to look for it and make friends with it, to see it as our constant and instructive companion, and perhaps in the depth of its impact as well as in its hindsight, and even its own reward. Heartbreak asks us not to look for an alternative path because there is no alternative path. It is an introduction to what we love and have loved, an inescapable and often beautiful question, something and someone that has been with us all along, asking us to be ready for the ultimate letting go. And the reason that I took so long to share that is because it gets at the core of the experience of being human. And one of the biggest ironies that I've noticed as when dealing with professionals and training is that we can get very, very good at something professionally, and we can use our excellence to better avoid our work in our personal lives. And so this is ironic where, even as we are trained in grief, even as we are trained to help others with these processes of feeling and grieving, when it comes to our own work, we can find ourselves as beginners, and we need to work our own process. What is the meaning of life? I'll get to meaning in just a moment, but one framework that has helped me tremendously is that the meaning of life, one meaning of life is to facilitate the flow of feelings and experiences through our body and make the most of it. Simply put, the meaning of life is to live it. And it's tragic how often we spend our lives avoiding that experience because it's overwhelming. It is really hard. If we're awake, if we're aware, it's really, really painful. Again, just to touch on my own story briefly, being neurodivergent and having childhood trauma, I have functional photographic memory. And so I've been my normal way of being functions as PTSD because I can't forget things. And so for me, just to be okay, and my normal state for a good 20, 30 years was feeling so alive, so sensitive that I wanted to die, to be very straightforward and name my own truth. And I integrated that feeling a couple of years ago, and I have not felt any suicidal ideation since. And so I really love in my work to share these tools that have helped me at the extremes. And so one framework that I found very useful is the idea of clean pain versus infected pain. And this is something that we all can understand intuitively, especially in a medical field, which is, so we can't change pain. We can't get rid of pain, the reality of pain, but we can do a couple things with it. We can keep it clean. So the way that emotional pain gets infected, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Emotional pain gets infected in this analogy that I'm using by resisting it and telling stories around it. And what I'm advocating is this simplicity on the other side of complexity. And I'll come back around to Buddhism. And as part of my training, I've done a 2-year Buddhist training. And I realized, this is very challenging for me, that explanation can function as avoidance. And at the most basic level, we can name our feelings in a very simple, clean way. And children know this. Children also know how to temper tantrum. I'll get to that in a moment. But just to say, I hurt, I'm sad, I'm scared, I'm happy. Like that level of straightforwardness when it comes to being in relationship to our feelings can be as simple and challenging as jumping into a cold lake. Like it's simple, we just avoid it. And another thing that I work to do with my own feelings is to spend the currency of pain and consequence, to shift from why me, which is resistance, to what now? What can I do with this? And a lot of us, Inside Out, brilliant movie, and a lot of us are familiar with the feeling wheel. So all of these things that we feel distill down to these really basic questions, these basic experiences. And our brains are working to keep us alive. And one of the challenges of being human is that our evolution, the way we're created, is calibrated for survival, not thriving. Just digest that for a minute. We are calibrated for survival rather than thriving. So nature wants us to be alive more than nature wants us to be happy or nature wants us to be well. So in order, this is what keeps us all employed, in order to thrive, in order to be well, in a very real way, we kind of need to trick our human natures. And the good news is that we all already have all of the resources that we need to be well. We just need to pivot and we need to practice. And I'll talk about some of these practices. So right now, we can be open to the idea that what we are feeling can be a lot more simple than sometimes we want to admit. Okay, so metabolizing life. This is what will make the price of admission, the free admission, worth it. This is my favorite metaphor, is metabolizing life. And going back to the beginning, grief is not so much something we do. Grief is something we are in relationship to. Grief is part of life because living, I mean, we are just alive. And so grief is just one feeling. And remember, I really love this image of, instead of like, I'm feeling this, I'm resisting this, it's allowing the feelings to flow through us without resistance. I didn't put this in the slides, but again, I love these pithy distillations. And remember that this is recorded, so we can come back to it. So this is 6 words that are the answer to everything. Ready? And I will leave about 10 minutes for questions and comments and awkward silences. So the 6 words are compassionate, curious, acceptance. And so this is the right way to respond to everything, is compassionate, curious, acceptance. And granted, if you're in immediate danger, sometimes that compassionate, curious acceptance has to happen really, really fast, and you need to move in order to be safe. But in most situations, we can take seriously what's happening and we can get curious around it. And again, sometimes that curiosity is, oh, wow, we need to get out of the way of what's happening right away, and then engage compassionately with whatever's happening. And again, I'll circle around to this, but one thing that makes living well difficult is that we are clogged. Our feeling pipes are clogged with our social conditioning, with stories, with patterns, habits, family of origin issues. We all have these clogs. And so my image is that of metabolizing, similar to our digestive process. And my favorite interventions, remember, I'm a wellness engineer, are the interventions that you don't need to understand in order to make them work. Isn't that fun? Like, wouldn't you love it if I could say, if you do these 5 things, you do not need to understand them, you do not need to agree with them, just do them and they will work. Well, I mean, that's exactly how I approach wellness. And so I like this organic metaphor of metabolizing, because as we know, when it comes to healing, our bodies, our minds, our souls, healing is something organic that happens if we can help the environment be clean and safe. And I'm not in any way minimizing the challenge that sometimes that is, but our beings know how to live and thrive and be well. Again, we just kind of need to trick ourselves. So my favorite approaches to wellness, and this applies to grief and every feeling, is that you don't need to do more than you're already doing, because this is one of the fundamental paradoxes of the wellness industry right now. So and like everything has become about selling something. Another reminder that I think is very important, naming, is that there is so much toxicity in our culture right now. And the phrase that I use is, we are trying to teach ourselves to swim. We're trying to teach each other how to swim when the water is poison. And so we need to make sure, we need to find a way to purify our environments, to create, it's a little bit like a water purifier when you're out camping. These practices, these life metabolizing practices, are like a water purifier that almost no matter what we're going through, they can help us keep our immediate environment as healthy as possible. So again, one of the backfire ironies of the wellness industry is that many approaches to wellness currently, with social media influencers and even in therapy sometimes, are that it's either pathologically based or it's overwhelming. It's like, oh, you just need to do this program, or attend this retreat, or meditate, eat better, sleep more, do yoga, more exercise. And also, you should feel terrible about yourself because you are not doing all of these things. So again, ironically, being aware of all of those things that we should be doing in order to be healthy make us feel worse. And so we're even less likely to do those things that will help us feel better. The psychology of motivation is one of my favorite topics. And so I take a different approach, which is pivot. Take everything you are already doing and do it a little bit different. Take the things that you already believe in, you already value, clean them up, turn up the volume of those practices so that they work better for you. So these are some examples of metabolizing life. And this daily ritual will not take any extra time, and it barely takes any effort. It's just a little, like a shift in perspective, that pivot. And this practice has the potential to save your life. The way, and as we know, the way that we think about things is literally a matter of life and death. One of the, it's darkly funny, and this is behavioral economics and priming, is again, the way that we think about things impacts the way that we metabolize it in our bodies. I need to look up her name, but a famous stress researcher who was the first to name the fact that if you are stressed, it's like smoking 10 packs of cigarettes a day, and if you're stressed, that will kill you more quickly than anything else. She realized that ironically, she was increasing the very damage her research was intended to address, because she conditioned a response. When people felt stressed, they're like, oh my gosh, if I'm stressed, that means I'm dying. And their bodies, when we're stressful bodies, were like, okay, we're dying. And again, it's very, very powerful. The placebo effect, and the opposite of a placebo is a nocebo. And what we believe has the power of life and death. And so this is a practice where if we engage with our daily rituals with a bit more intentionality, it can literally save our lives and increase our day-to-day well-being significantly. So here are a few things that you can do that don't really take much extra time or even energy. We just need to think to do them and practice doing them. So when you wake up, say one thing you're grateful for, and don't lie to yourself. Say things out loud. I want to encourage you all to talk to yourself if you don't already. We're a neurotic bunch, so you probably do. When you wake up, say something you're grateful for. It can be super simple. It can be something like, I'm grateful I'm comfortable in this moment. I'm grateful that I have a moment to breathe. I'm grateful to not be hot right now. I'm grateful, like there is always something to be grateful for. Like one reason why I am so drawn to extreme environments, and when I'm not working in the military, ER, ICU, police, hospital, like prison, all of these things, I listen to military prisoner of war memoirs, like I am so fascinated by the way that we humans behave at the extremes of the human experience, because what is very, very clear at the extremes is always true of us. So for example, yesterday I talked to someone in the ICU who had been in the ICU for 3 months. That's hard. It is hard to be in the hospital for 3 months. But depending on the way we think about it, it will radically shift the way we experience it. More on that in just a moment. So for example, I was driving in a snowstorm a couple months ago, and I was saying, I am grateful for the snowplows. I am grateful for windshield wipers. So just be aware of those things that you're grateful for. Okay, so next, this is mindfulness meditation in a moment, but find times during your day where you can just breathe. I hold my breath a lot during the day, and I'm proud of myself because I'm not proud of myself that I used to lose my temper, but breath work has changed my life. So multiple times during the day, I'll do breath work, hold my breath, breathe it out slowly, and that literally resets your nervous system. One of my favorite nerdy details I've ever learned is that the actual social scientific mechanism of chaplaincy of a non-anxious presence, and all of us therapists, the clinical therapeutic practices, we do this if we're good at our jobs. We are a non-anxious presence because we are literally calibrating our nervous system to be able to be calm in crisis. Isn't that fascinating? So the ministry of a non-anxious presence, put in a bit of a playful way, is that often the most helpful thing we can do is do nothing calmly, even in crisis. And that emotional regulation is what enables us to engage constructively. And one thing that I'm proud of, and you can feel it even over the camera, is even when I'm in presentation mode, even when I'm talking quickly, there is a calm groundedness to my energy. So during your day, find moments to breathe and just be in the moment, because if we can drop into our bodies can process through whatever we're experiencing. So when you shift to a different location, whether it's arriving to work or a new patient, name your why. So remind yourself of a value that motivates you in your work. And these can be aspirational or really, really practical. So for example, and in some of my wellness interventions, what I'll do is I'll have staff members like write their aspirational value on one side of a piece of paper and their rock bottom value on the other side. So the rock bottom value may be, I'm here for a paycheck, and then the aspirational may be, I'm here to help people. So for example, I feel like when I am put to my best use, I feel very peaceful and happy. Like my sense of purpose is my home. And my rock bottom value is I experience everything as puzzles, and it keeps me endlessly entertained and engaged. Okay, so when you're in a challenging environment and just in general, find opportunities to drop into your body. So for example, when you're washing your hands, notice the temperature of the water, notice the texture of the soap. And so these, again, when you're in your body has that opportunity to process through whatever we're feeling. And it can literally prevent stress and from building up in our body. It keeps that flow. When you're about to transition from something, say one thing that's true. that was a really hard death. I'm really frustrated. I'm stressful about this. I'm really grateful for my coworker. So you can either say that to someone or you can say that to yourself. This is the most important part of this practice. When you get home, remind yourself that you're home. I have a whole Mr. Rogers routine. And, like I instantly change into comfortable clothes when I get home. And so, and I have so many notebooks. Like I use a different notebook for each context I'm in as these embodied reminders of where I am and what I'm doing. And then this is, if you only remember one thing, remember this. This can save your life. This is a practice of washing off the day. So when you take a shower, and showering, there's a reason why we talk about shower thoughts, because showering is one of the most powerful rituals that most of us experience. There's that familiarity, the repetition, we're vulnerable, it's soothing. There's usually the scent involved, there's that massage experience of the water, temperature. There's a lot going on in our bodies. And so this is one example of take what you're already doing and make it more powerful and make it work for you. So what I recommend that you do in the shower is to just check in with your body and say, okay, what am I feeling right now? Whether it's fatigue, exhaustion, anger, frustration, sadness, happiness, and say, no matter what it is, say, this feeling is flowing through my body like this water, and imagine that feeling going down the drain. If you just imagine that, you probably already feel calmer. Isn't that wild? You can also coordinate your soap. So have a different kind of soap depending on what you're feeling. There's lots and lots of things you can do. And then at bedtime, like I'm a compulsive journaler. And so, but at minimum at bedtime, just say something to yourself, like I'm proud of myself, or I'm proud of you. Like our bodies, like if you say you to yourself, that's more powerful self-talk. Say something you're grateful for, process, tomorrow's another day. I'm embarrassed by that thing. Just name something that's true. The psychology of dreaming is that our brains are doing their best to metabolize through what we've experienced and make sense of it, and also get ready for something that may be happening. Okay, so next, meaning. The meaning of life is very much a do it yourself exercise. Do not tell other people what their life means. Do not tell other people what their experience means. This is the worst thing that people do, as we know, when it comes to grief. Is Brene Brown has that really great video, the sympathy versus empathy. And when we try to put meaning on other people's experiences, it will backfire. It will do harm. And the paradox is that we all do this to ourselves. When it comes to what something means, we all have our stories, our upbringing, family of origin, cultural conditioning. Like one of my favorite classes that I took in divinity school was constructive theology. And there was this idea of social conditioning as original sin. Isn't that wild? And that's something that I very much believe in. Like we are all partakers of a whole world of narratives about what we need to be, how we need to respond. I'll do a quick plug for the Barbie movie. It is fantastic. But again, we have all of these narratives. So what we need to do, or what's healthy to do, is we can surrender our stories about meaning, need, and we can be in conversation with life. And this is where Buddhism is just amazing and powerful. And the idea of non-attachment is very often misunderstood. Many people think that non-attachment means detachment, and it doesn't. Non-attachment means that you are fully present in whatever you're experiencing. You just aren't attached to a particular outcome or a particular meaning. Really quick, there's a great story, a Zen story, a Buddhist story of this farmer. And so, he's a poor farmer. He lives on his farm with his only son. And suddenly a horse wanders onto his property. And for a poor farmer, that's a lot of wealth. And his neighbors, he does have neighbors. His neighbors say, "Wow, you are so lucky that this horse wandered onto your property." And he's like, "Good, bad, lucky, unlucky, we'll see." And then his son was breaking in the horse. And then the next day the horse left. And his neighbor said, "Oh, you are so unlucky. That is so bad." He said, "Good, bad, we'll see." And then a week later, the horse came back with 4 other horses. And the neighbors are like, "Wow, this is so good." You already, get the punchline. Good, bad, we'll see. And then the son was trying to break in one of the other horses, and he fell off and broke his leg. His neighbors, these neighbors are very annoying, and they're like the people who engage with us around grief and feelings. His neighbors say, "Oh, that is so unlucky that your son broke his leg. Good, bad, lucky, unlucky, we'll see." And then the next week, the king's soldiers came and said, "We are going to war. We need every healthy young man to join our army." And because the son had broken his leg, he stayed behind to help his father and did not need to go to war. And once again, he said, "Good, bad, we'll see." And so this is the process of advanced gratitude, where this idea, so one of my own practices is I really have processed almost all resistance out of me. I'm a recovering idealist. I got tired of breaking my heart against life. And so advanced gratitude, like one thing that we learn in end of life care is that the things that we thought we wanted, the things we thought we couldn't live without, they end up being exactly what ended up being best for us. And at an even deeper level, there is always a way to respond to whatever happens in a healthy way. And so this is what I mean when I summarize and say the healthiest way to engage with life is to show up with proper form. And so this has really helped me relax my attachment to a particular outcome and focus on what I can do. This is how I want to respond when something happens to me. This is how I want to respond to disappointment. And so this is, this metaphor of compost, where life and death, grief and joy, the whole experience of life is just this integrated mix of things that is very fertile. And we can use everything we experience. Again, I'm not minimizing or discounting how painful and difficult it is to go through the difficulties of life. But I am a deep believer, even and the extremes of life teach us this, that we can maximize our internal resources no matter what our situations are. One of my favorite summaries is that social work connects us to this is an oversimplification, but it's a memorable one. Social work connects us to our external resources, and chaplaincy connects us to our internal resources. And so no matter what our situation is, we can always maximize our access to our internal resources. And this, again, is one reason why I'm so inspired by these extreme, intense situations, even if it's something like prison, dying, emergency response, disaster, prisoner of war, is that we can learn from the way that people respond in the most extreme situations. So what we can do is we can focus on showing up, living with proper form, and engaging in that practice of living well that updates our versions of self. And this, we are in relationship to grief, we are in relationship with life. And if we engage in these healthy practices, we become versions of ourself who can handle things more than we ever imagined. And so this is something that not only can we help all of those that we are working with, but we can integrate it into our lives as well. And I'll conclude with this. Of course, we cannot help others beyond our own level of growth and practice around these healthy approaches. Thank you. And again, questions, comments, any way that you want to use the rest of this time, abandonment, avoidance, I'm here for it.
Thank you, Jared. Absolutely remarkable, very thought-provoking, provocative indeed. Yes, thank you, Sarah. Fantastic presentation. We appreciate you for being here today. I did have, I wanted to hear again from you, Jared. Um, those extreme situations, why again you're drawn into it and what the base that you found from those different extreme situations. Can you repeat that a little bit more?
Yeah. So like my own personal sense of meaning is I have learned that for me, I'm only speaking for myself, um, living is kind of agonizing for me. And so the way, like I used to summarize it, so alive I want to die, so resilient I never will. And so the way that I have made peace with my own brain chemistry, consciousness experience is I want to be put to the best use. Like if I can't decrease the amount of pain, because I like go to bed fetal position level pain often, and I just want to make the most of it. I can spend the cost of that. And so there are these two levels are for me personally, using myself at the extremes is just the best use of me. And that's why I'm so happy in the military, in law enforcement and disaster level. That's what I'm calibrated for. But for all of us, the extremes, and this is a gift of end of life care, the worse things are, the more clear they are, or the harder they are, the more clear they are. And so one reason why I love working in these extreme environments is everything gets so clear. And we humans forget things so quickly. And this is why art and disaster movies and things like that are so helpful, because when we watch a movie about a plane crash, we know that what is the one thing we want to do. We just want to tell our loved ones that we love them one more time. And yet in the moment of the day, what do? We get in stupid fights. And so one of the greatest gifts is that we can integrate this like extremes, like whether it's end of life or whatever, this extreme awareness into our regular practice.
Beautiful. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. 100%. Wow. Do we have some more questions or thoughts, comments? Well, I will also say absolutely that I practice of having those feelings and acknowledging them in the shower, that ritual, and having that wash over you. I love that. That's very applicable, something that we can do daily. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Jared, for initiating that conversation.
And Jared, you had two
Jared,
comments. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Sarah Black wanted to say fantastic presentation. Thank you. Heidi Yeager, great presentation and time management. Jared, 7 says to tell you hi.
and Jared, this is Heidi as well. I just wanted to tell you, I wrote down that quote because that's so impactful about, oh, I have to read it because I've already forgotten it. But the different, where social work connects us to our external resources, chaplaincy connects us to our internal resources. That just says so much so briefly, and I'm always having a hard time explaining the difference to people. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm whenever people compliment me, I quote Princess Bride. Not every time, but I really love that fight scene, where Inigo Montoya says, "You're very good," and Wesley says, "Thank you. I've worked hard to become so." And like, I'm so grateful for chaplaincy because it really has required me to engage in the practice and the training to be a professional, decent human being. And I'm not like I am naturally a really rigorous, like I'm a relentless person. Like you can feel that even from my energy, and it can be punishing for the people around me. And like one thing that I want to conclude with, and again, we have a few minutes, is there is a healthy way to express everything about you. I'm actually working on a whole compassion deck around this. I have so many projects. I'm designing a paramilitary wellness organization. Uh, but it's and again, feel free, take a deep breath. That was a lot. And so just let it wash over you, wash through you. Things will come back to you throughout the week. And again, we'll make the recording access to you so you can return to it, take notes on it. Like I'm very aware of the fact that I'm a lot.
You're absolutely right. I want to go back to the recording, most definitely. I do have to say as well that the stress, you can see it on people. I've noticed I've noticed in the past there's been a few people where they retire and all of a sudden I see them a few months later and they look physically 10 years younger. It is very apparent. And just those thoughts that we meditate on and that we think and we speak, it absolutely does change our body chemistry.
Yeah, and like one more final concluding thought is, so the summary of this entire presentation is create a process sufficient to your life.
Yeah.
Like create a process of practice, metabolizing organic flow, and it needs to be rest. Like one of my favorite summaries that I came up with is like, it's not work-life balance, it's work-life sustainability. And so we can figure out a sustainable practice for us that is sufficient for our life. And if we cannot sustain our life, that means something needs to change. Either if like our practice needs to increase to the level of our life, or we need to shift our context, if we can, to the level that we can sustain. And this really is a matter of life and death. And I love the empowering pivot of, it's not that we like need to do all these things and need to do all these practices. It's that we can take seriously what we want to do, what we need to do, what we do, and we can design a minimal, like my own brand is called Minimal Wellness, which is like, what is the least you need to be okay? What is the least you need to be better? And my metaphor is a greenhouse. Like I'll leave you with this. is I love the idea of a greenhouse, because a greenhouse is the minimum level of structure that you need so that life can thrive, like to this maximum level. And so again, all of us can do that. So our practices, our environments are that structure, and our internal practices and responses are that greenhouse, that can live and thrive. And I absolutely know that all of us, no matter what situation we're in, can, again, like we can nurture that internal greenhouse to live better.
Well, thank you so much, Jared. So much. Absolutely remarkable. I'm excited to chat with you offline as well. Um, it doesn't appear as we have any more questions or comments, but um, we'll be again gathering next month, same time, same link, and we hope you all enjoyed. If you have any additional questions, we can definitely reach out to Jared. Maybe if you want to put your contact information to the chat, that could be helpful for some people. Thank
Yeah, and
you.
I'm super approachable. So like anytime you want to reach out,